So for more on President Biden's spending plan, let's bring in Kentucky Republican James Comer, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee and a member of the House Committee on Education and Labor. It gets a little tough to keep track of the trillions of dollars that are getting tossed around in Washington right now. The president is proposing a $1.5 trillion spending plan on top of the infrastructure plan that is already proposed and in the trillions. What do you think of it?
Well, I think it's too much spending. I think we have to get spending under control before we do anything. And as has already been mentioned on the show, we're already seeing signs of inflation in just about every area of our economy. We have employers who are very frustrated with policy coming out of Washington now because they're trying to get people to come back to work, but because of previous COVID relief bills, people are still being paid not to work. So there's a lot of frustration with the job creators in this economy right now. And then you throw in Biden's proposal to increase taxes and it just gets worse.
Well, and then there's this. The president campaigned as a champion of the middle class. But if you're allowing tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of immigrants to basically walk across the border and start applying for work in this country, doesn't that drive down employment wages for American, middle class and even lower class?
Yes, it does. That's a huge problem. In addition to the problem that all these unaccompanied minors who are coming across the border, they're automatically enrolled in the welfare program. We have no idea in Congress how much Biden's already spent on welfare programs. I mean, these minors are coming over by the hundreds every day. And it's just a huge burden on the taxpayers. And I think that once the American people see how much money Joe Biden's already spent in his first 100 days, they're going to demand that Congress try to rein in some of this out of control spending.
Wait a minute. You say Congress has no idea how much the administration has been spending on some of these programs?
That's exactly right. I just led the House Oversight Committee to the border last week, and we've been asking questions of the Biden administration, and we have yet to receive answers. No member of Congress knows how much money Joe Biden spent. We're creating sanctuary cities all over the United States right now with these unaccompanied minors, and it comes at a huge expense to the taxpayers. We've learned that a lot of these companies are coming in and getting no-bid contracts to try to convert hotels, for example, into shelters for all these immigrants that are being housed across on our side of the border. So it's a huge expense, and the lack of transparency from the Biden administration is very disturbing.
Well, talking about lack of transparency, who's in charge?
That's a great question. We've asked that, especially when it comes to border security. According to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris is in charge, but we haven't seen her set foot on the border. We haven't seen a plan. They've just completely turned a blind eye to what's happening on the border, and it is a crisis, and we've talked about that. But also with respect to who's in charge, no member of Congress that I know of, Republican member, has received a briefing on what the president's going to propose in his budget. We hear different news reports of things that I think the administration's leaking out, but the lack of cooperation is troubling, especially when you consider the fact that Joe Biden during his inauguration said that he was going to work with Congress in a bipartisan way, because Congress is split. The House is basically split, the Senate is split, but no cooperation with the Republicans thus far from the Biden administration.
What would you like to hear from him very quickly when he speaks to Congress to that joint session?
Well, if he's going to talk about infrastructure, our definition of infrastructure is roads, bridges, rural broadband, locks and dams through the inland waterways. These are basic infrastructure projects. But what we're hearing from progressives are Green New Deal, social justice, things that daycare, things that don't have anything to do with infrastructure. So Biden's going to have to get his priorities in order. He's going to have a clearly defined budget that we know exactly where the money's going, or he's going to continue to see absolutely no Republican support on his massive spending proposals.